Good morning. My name is Kyle Houchins. I'm a tech and a trainer for McNeil. I also run a consultancy called the Outside Digital Art and Design. Information here if you're interested in any of that. Um, these webinars are a little different if you haven't seen these before. They're a little different than most software demos that you've seen. The intent of this is to help you get over clean sheet syndrome, right? Which is what we're seeing right here. We just got a blank Rhino screen on there and we're trying to figure out what to do, right? So how do you get started? How do you think about getting started? And what do you do when you get stuck? Because I don't say if you get stuck, I say when you get stuck, because it happens to all of us. If you haven't built something before, you are going to run into problems that you haven't had before. So I try to put myself in a position, the same position that you're in. I either do a sketch first thing in the morning, which I did this morning, or the evening before, and then I don't look at it again until I sit down to do this, because I want to kind of simulate the scenario that you go through with somebody walks into your office, or in this case, nobody's walking into anybody's office anywhere right now. But if you get something emailed to you, and you have to build it, and you've never seen it before, what do you do? How do you get started, and things like that. So today, I did a scruffy little sketch, and also these are intended to be interactive. That's why I was kind of encouraging everybody to find the chat. So this is kind of intended to be a conversation between you and I. And so if you see something that you don't understand, or you see something that you haven't seen before, or you want to see more of something, hit the chat, let me know. Feel free to ask questions. Feel free to um, you know, type thoughts or anything like that into the chat, and I'll do my best to respond to all of that so that we can make sure that this information is useful. So if we have a problem along the way, I'm going to stop. I'm going to explain what the problem was, how I modeled myself into a corner, or if there's a software problem or something like that. We definitely want to show how the sausage is made here. So you're going to see everything: good, bad, indifferent, ugly, terrible, wonderful, all that stuff that's going to happen today. If we're just going to roll with it and talk about it, and if something happens with the model or something happens with Rhino, we're going to talk about it and try and figure out how to fix it. Hopefully that's useful information as well. So with that said, I'm going to start, as I always do, with a scruffy little sketch. And I kind of like these old vintage microphones, right? And so I just did a really, and I'm going to zoom in and out so you can't see how terrible my sketch is. But it's this kind of idea, and these things have kind of a couple of interesting forms about them, right? The base of the microphone itself is actually continuously curving. There's no flat surfaces on this thing anywhere, and sometimes that can be a very difficult shape to model in Rhino. And so we want to talk about that, and I haven't thought a whole lot about how I'm going to get there, but I've got a couple of ideas formulating. So we'll talk about a couple of different ways to do shapes like this, and which can sometimes be challenging to model in NURBS. Now, if this was sub D, it'd be a piece of cake, and that's coming in version 7. If you haven't tried version 7 yet, definitely want to take a peek at that, because that's pretty exciting stuff. But let's talk about the simple stuff, right? So we've got just a revolved base. We've got a button, we've got some embossed text, we've got another revolved piece, we've got a cylinder, we've got this little U-shaped bracket, we've got a little coily cord back here, and then the star of the show, of course, would be this microphone shape, which is going to be the biggest challenge. And then the other thing that's interesting about this is these vents, right, these openings wrap around the side. So we can't just do a straight projection. We're going to have to do 2 projections, and then figure out how to break this up, and then figure out how to get it offset correctly and all that kind of stuff. So there's a deceptively challenging little piece, even though it looks kind of simple. So let's go ahead and jump in. So I used the picture command. You saw me do that already up here. The picture command in order to get the image into the scene. And one minor complication of this drawing is the fact that it's not necessarily perfectly orthogonal, right? If it was, this would just be a rectangle from the side view. But the fact that this is tilted gives us a little bit of a challenge, because we have to try and figure out how to work around that. But let's go ahead and start. So I'm going to just take this image, and I'm going to slide it back in space. And the reason that I'm going to do that is if I were to model, especially in a shaded view, and I were to leave the image at 0, it it puts me in a position where the image goes right through the center of the scene, and I don't like that. So I'm gonna take the image and I'm gonna slide it back out of the modeling envelope so that I can see the image as I'm working around it, and then stick it back there in space so I don't have to deal with it. I think my ground plane is on. Something weird is going on with my ground plane in shaded view. Let's see what's going on here. See how the grid turned gray on me here? I'm not wild about that. Let's see if we can fix this. I mistakenly made the biggest mistake of updating right before I did a webinar, but let's just set this to defaults, and I think that will fix it. Hey, there we go. So first problem of the day we've solved. If you see anything weird, tools, options, go to your view display modes. Anything that's blue is not default. That means that something on that has been changed. And if you just click on it, go to restore defaults, a lot of times it will reset that. And in this case, that's the case. So that's our first win of the day. So I'm going to get rid of this. We've slid this back into space so that it's out of the modeling window. And then I'm going to open my layers palette, and I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to call it image, and I'm going to assign that object to that layer. And then that way I can lock it, or I can hide it, or I can do anything I want with it from there. Nice thing about the picture frame, or the picture command, is it is just an object. I can copy it, I can rotate it, I can scale it, I can do anything I want to this thing because it's literally just a surface with an image mapped onto it. And that is much more useful than if you came with us from version 3 or 4 or something like that and had to use background bitmap. I don't know if you remember that one. If anybody's old enough to remember that one, but that one was not terribly useful or not terribly flexible in the case if you needed to manipulate the image once you've placed it in the scene. So the last thing I need to do is I need to change its transparency, and I'm going to just drag this up a little bit. If I go to the materials tab, if you don't have the materials tab, right click on it, and there's a whole list of stuff here. Make sure that it's checked. The first one will be the first material you'll see in here is actually the picture frame. If you click on that, it brings up its materials properties, and you can change the transparency down here where it's something that if you were to work over it, you can now see your line work. If we didn't change that transparency, it would be difficult to see any line work that we were put over it. So the last thing we're going to do is go back here. We're going to lock it so that it can't be selected, and then that allows us to just work over it and go from there. So I know this is a disk, right? So I know this is kind of just a revolved object, even though it's tilted. And I even went so far as to draw a section line through here. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to unlock this for a second, and I'm going to locate this right over as close to centered over the origin as possible so that I can give myself at least a fighting chance of trying to build this thing symmetrically. And then I'm going to kind of look at this section line, and I'm going to start by saying, well, maybe the designer knew what he was doing, and the irony of that is I was the one that did the sketch. And the section line is actually something that I need to follow. So in that case, I'm going to just go ahead and follow it, right? And in this case, I need to change this a little bit, make this a little roundier. Actually, I'm going to pull the center up like that. And then I need to decide, like, is that too much? I think that's probably too much. So I'm going to actually drop this instead. And you're like, oh, it's not touching anymore. I'm like, yeah, I know, that's fine. We're just going to trim it. And it disappeared because it wasn't completely overlapping. So let's do that. Trim and trim. And then we'll join it up into a single polycurve. So now that gives us our disk. Let's go ahead and revolve it from the top view. We'll just use the revolve tool, which lives down here. I'm going to set the axis at 0. And then if I look at the command line, it says press enter to use the C-plane Z axis direction, which is exactly what I want. So I'm going to hit enter. And then I'm going to look at the command line again and see there's one up here for full circle, and I'm going to click that. and it's just going to complete and give me the object. Now, I need to look at it and say, is this kind of matching design intent, right? It looks to me like this proportion here might be a little bit less than I have going on here. And so because I built this with history, right, I had always update and record, or record history and update children turned on. I can go to my original curve and I can grab one of the original points and I can drag this up and the part is going to update. And I think that feels a little better. I can even change the shape by pulling it out like that, but I don't want to do that. All right. So I've got my basic revolved object, and one of the things, if you've seen these videos before, you'll see that I tend to like to work in what I call chunks. And so I'm actually going to cap this and turn it into a solid closed poly surface, right? And the reason that I do this is I like to do this along the way so that when I get to the end of the model, right, and I'm tired and I'm cranky and I'm done modeling for the day because I'm a big whiny man baby, I don't have to go through and fix anything if I want to throw this to a printer or I want to throw this to somebody who's using Pro E or SolidWorks or something like that. The model's already watertight, it's already done. So I do this along the way and I check each chunk or each piece to make sure that it's watertight along the way. And one of the tools that's super useful for that lives down here, and it's called Show Edges. And in this case, if I pick this, it brings up a little dialog box, and there's a setting in here for naked edges. And you can see that in the command line, it reports there's 4 edges on this model. None of them are naked. None of them are non-manifold, which means this is a closed object, which means it's good if I were to export this as STL or OBJ or FBX or whatever to a printer. The printer would be able to print it because it's a closed part. Okay, that makes sense? So I could shell this too, but I'm not going to because I'm lazy. I mean, efficient. We're being efficient, not lazy. Now we're being lazy. It's fine. So the next thing I want to do is I want to break down each one of these individual pieces, and I could make each piece individually, but again, we want to be lazy / efficient, and you call it lazy, I call it efficient, and we're going to just go ahead and draw these pieces individually, right? And I'm going to do it as one big revolve. The other thing I'm going to talk about is the rule of 3 points to make a corner. But let's place this right about there. And then I'm going to join these up. I'm going to revolve these again, just like we did before. Enter. Remember the command line. See how it's got the U underlined? If I just type U enter, it finishes. That's one cool thing about the command line. If you look at the command line, see the one that's underlined? See how the D is underlined and the F is underlined, the U and the A? That's the hotkey for it. So if you haven't recognized that little trick before, so that way, if we were to do this, watch how fast we can do this. I can pick the curve, I can type revolve, I can say enter, 0 enter, I can say enter for the C-plane, U enter, and it's done. And I don't really have to do any clicking, right? It just all goes really fast. And so once you've done this, 4, 5, 6 times, 10,000 times, 40,000 times like I have, you'll remember it and you'll get into a rhythm, and it really, using Rhino is going to start going really, really fast for you. All right, so those little visual tricks are really useful. Now this thing is open, right? If I say show edges and I've got that in my pop-up, it's open, right? So all I have to do is cap it, and now this is a closed chunk and that's a closed chunk, and I can either Boolean these together, I can Boolean these, do a difference, or I could print this part and print this part, and I know that it's good to go, right? So that's one of the reasons that I like to kind of continuously work in chunks. And sometimes I'll even just leave this open, but because I have it in my pop-up, I just refer to it easily. So I always get a question when I do these videos about the pop-up. If I middle mouse button, the pop-up comes up, right? If I grab it by this light blue title bar and wiggle it, it's now docked. Now the cool thing about it being docked is I can go over here and I can grab any tool I want from any tab, right? I can go to any tab I want. So let's do, let's throw one from here. Let's grab this guy, this capture viewport to file. If I hold down the control key, see how it says copy link? I just drag it over here and now it's in my toolbar. If I want to get rid of it, I shift where it says move edit and I drag it out and it says delete and it removes it from the toolbar. I can then close it and then that tool would be in my pop-up for good. Now, one thing I want to point out is if you do this, make sure that when you're copying things, you use control, not shift. See how it says move edit? If I were to move this, it's going to actually remove it from this toolbar and put it in this toolbar, which is great, except for the fact that it's no longer in this toolbar. So if I delete it from here, I've just deleted the tool. And I don't want to do that. I'm going to have to use toolbar reset and lose all my customization. So we don't want to do that. So make sure that you're using control, which is the copy, right? We want to copy it. And then if you want to remove it from this, which is the copy, right? This is a copied thing. There's still the original is still here. Then I can use move with the shift key and actually pull it out of there and delete. But I'm actually going to leave it there because that's a useful tool. All right. Any questions about that? Anybody use pop-ups? If you don't, you should because they're super useful. I have most of this is just about everything I need to build a model in Rhino, which is crazy because there's a billion other tools, but so be it. All right, so the next thing we want to look at is this kind of U-shaped thing, and I'm going to start from the center on this one and draw out. And this is where I'm going to talk about rule of three. Rule of three is in NURBS and in sub-Ds, you only need 3 points to make a corner. So I've got a point that's leading into my corner, right? This is my anchor point. This is the first point of my corner, the second point of my corner, the third part of my corner, and then there's a lead out here, right? So if I were to look at this thing and I were to evaluate how this corner is set up, if I need this to be tighter, I just move the 3 points closer. If I need this to be softer, I just move the 3 points apart. What we don't want to do is this. That is not a good NURBS corner. Don't do that. You do not need this many points to turn a corner. You only need 3. And I can hear what you're saying. Well, what if I have to make a shape that has more than one corner in it? Same thing. Lead in, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's the first one, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3. So if we look at this thing, this is in its simplest form, right? So this is the lead in, that's just the anchor for the curve. That's the first corner, 1, 2, 3. If I want to tighten that up, I come over here like this. Now, the one thing about this is because there's 3 points in this corner, but I was sharing this point with this corner, this point has to decide, is it coming over here or is it going over here? So that means I probably, if I want to control each one of these things individually, I need to make sure that I have enough points to do each corner individually. Now, in this case, because I want these to transition smoothly in and out of each other, I can share that point. But if I want to do it a little bit more accurately, I would say 1, 2, 3, come over here, 1, 2, 3, come up here, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then lead it out. And now the way that this is set up, I can control this corner independently from this corner. All right, so that's a case where you would want each corner to have 3 points individually. In this case, if you want to soften it up, you can share a point. You know, maybe I want to place that right smack dab in the middle and know that these two corners are going to blend fairly similarly. But my point of all of this is reduce the amount of points in your curves. Less points, pull them farther, make them work harder. If you make a corner, it's only 3 points. Don't do more, all right? That right there is going to help improve your surface quality a lot. So that said, let's start from here. I'm going to start at the center of this guy using an O-snap. And then I'm going to go to the front view. Helps if we do it correctly. Let's start at the center, go to the front view, and then I'm going to shift drag out, and then you can see my corner right here, right? So that's going to be the first point. The second point is going to come out here, and had persistent close on, that's why that was being weird. And then I'm going to stretch this up here, and I've missed the corner, but that's okay. And then I'm going to finish it up there. Now, because I've got a really simple curve, it's easy to manipulate. So I'm going to pull this over to where it needs to be. Let's go for the inside of that. And then you can see that that actually has landed almost exactly how I wanted it to be. If it wasn't, it's a simple matter of just tightening it or loosening it as needed. Right? Now this curve is going to be important because I think I might steal this and use this as a basis for the microphone because I want these two shapes to relate, right? We want a family of shapes situation going on. So let's do some trickery here. Let's just draw a little straight line that indicates our thickness. And let's do a sweep 1, which lives over here. Try not to use my pop-ups because then you're like, where's that tool? Sweep 1 is right here. So let's pick this as our rail. That's our curve. We're just going to let it run and say, okay. Now we're going to do some gumball fun. I'm going to just start dragging from the dot, and I'm going to hold down Shift, and it's going to extrude in both directions. And then we've got a solid piece. Now, if I were looking at this, I would say that I probably need to take this and move it like that instead. And I'd like it to be precise. So I'm going to relocate my gumball to here, and then using O snaps, I'm going to snap it to the center line of that particular piece. If your gumball doesn't have snappy dragging set up, click on the bunny tail and change it from smooth to snappy. Then it will respect all of your O snaps. All right, so we've got this piece built. Let's go ahead and mirror it. And I just use the mirror command there. And you can see that in this case, we can evaluate this and see how we did as far as centerline tangency. And in this case, it looks pretty good. But we can also double check that if we look at our original curve. Let's isolate that curve for the time being. Whoops. And in order to make sure that we have centerline tangency of the original curve that we used to make this, we want to look at the points of each one of these curves. And in this case, if I were to grab the 0 point, right, this is the positional tangency point, and then the tangent point, which is the next one out, the G1 point, if you hear it referred to as that, you can see that gumball reports back with no scale handle in this direction. If they were out of scale, right, like this, gumball would have a handle down here, but it doesn't. So that means that these are in a straight line, which means we have centerline tangency. Okay, if the G0, G1, and G2, or the positional, tangent, and curvature ones are all lined up, which they are in this case, we actually have curvature tangency here because all 3 of those points are lined up on both sides of the joint here, right? So we're in good shape. So I feel good about that. So I'm going to just go ahead and delete it, bring everything back. And I know that we've got good tangency side to side. And in this case, I want to show you a power that V6 has that V5 used to struggle with, which is coplanar booleans. In this case, this plane right in the center, this one, is exactly coplanar with the one on the other side. And I guess I should try it first before I shoot my mouth off. But V5 used to fail very often in that situation, whereas V6 tends to handle that a lot better. So that's a good thing right there. Now, just from a design point of view, I don't like how this thing and this thing are relating together, and I could fix that by simply just scaling this and making it wider, but I don't necessarily think that's the right choice. I think what I want to do is I want to make a little adapter from this to this. And so what I'm going to do is grab this guy, I'm going to start dragging, and I'm going to tap Alt. A little plus sign is going to show up next to my cursor. I don't know if you can see that flashing right now. And then I'm going to let go, and I'm going to actually copy the top of that surface, which is super useful. Now, because I have snappy dragging turned on. I'm going to O-snap it right to the top of this, and maybe I'll go just a little higher because I don't like that. So let's pull it up just a little bit, and then I'm gonna extrude again using snappy dragging right to the top of this, and then I've got those two pieces that are stuck together. Now I've got a little witness here, which I don't necessarily like, but I'm going to deal with that by putting a little blend on this. And a 1 unit blend is way too big, so I'm going to pull that down and make it much smaller. 0.06 looks about right, and I'm going to run that. And then I may even, while I've got this, and I think I probably need to deal with this shape up here first, I'll probably blend off the edges and then Boolean these two pieces together. But let's sort out the shape on the side first. Now this is definitely, I want this to have a round profile, and I can either do that with a fillet or I could trim it, but I think I'm going to do it with a fillet because I'm lazy, efficient. And I'm going to take a look at this and see how these previews, I don't know if you can see that or not, but the previews are overlapping. So I'm going to bring those back a little bit just until it's very close to touching the center line, but not touching the center line. And I'm going to say 0.947944, something like that. So 0.94 seems to be about right. So I'm going to change that to 0.94 using set all and run it. And I went too far, so I'm going to run it again, previous edge selection, and then I'm going to set all to 0.9. And then it went, and you can see that it did it. Pretty happy with that. I mean, ideally, if this was a straight line, then I would have nailed it, but we got an hour. I'm not going to go crazy. Run the same thing on the other side. Now I can run my blend on the edge of that thing, right-click on the fillet tool to get a blend edge, and I'm going to chain edges here, chain edges here as well. And I want to put a very small radius on this thing using set all. What do we use? 0.06 before? That'll work. Now I can stick these two guys together, and I have to decide, do I want a little witness line between this part and this part? If so, I'm probably going to want to round the top of that and that as well. So let's do that. I'm going to hide this, and let's put a little tiny blend on that. I like this kind of old, like 40s styling where everything was a little heavy and chrome and Bakelite and all that stuff was kind of cool. Now we'll just stick these two together with a Boolean. And the Boolean failed, so let's figure out why. Because Rhino puked on that, so let's figure out why. And I think I can see why. See how this is sticking through? Let's scale this up just a microscopic amount and see if we can make sure that we get a clean intersection. In that case, it works. So what was happening there, let's go backwards, is Rhino is having a hard time, this intersection right here, where it goes from out here to in here, this little sliver that it made is probably very close to our file tolerance, and so it's having a hard time deciding what's going on there. Now, if I didn't want to scale, I could probably, let's go to the bottom view, I could probably hack this out like this. And I could probably trim that entire section out, which gives me a much cleaner intersection. Now let's see if that alone will fix it. I'm guessing, but let's see. And in that case, it did. So that was the problem. Now, a good diagnosis for Booleans, if they don't work, is the intersect tool, which lives over here. If you intersect the two objects, you can examine the curves that it made originally and see where the mess is. Anytime there's not a closed surface, or anytime where there's an ambiguous intersection, that's where the Boolean is going to fail. So that's a good diagnosis there. So if your Booleans fail, don't freak out. all Rhino is telling you is it can't figure out what the cleanest intersection of that surface is, and you have to do a little bit of investigation. In this case, we got away with it. We didn't have to make any modifications. Our part still lines up in the same place and all that kind of stuff. Now, there's a little pivot that's inside here, so let's go ahead and make that. We're going to make that kind of a cool way. I'm going to Shift-Control-Click, which allows me to sub-object select a piece of this poly surface, right? This is a poly surface. Shift-Control-Click allows me to select just that surface. I'm going to start dragging up, and I'm going to tap Alt, there we go. Give it to me till a little plus sign shows up, and I'm going to copy that piece of that surface off. I'm going to shift drag, scale it down. I'm going to bring it down here to snap, and then I'm going to move it up just a tiny little bit. Then I'm going to drag straight down using the extrude dot, and that's going to give me that pivot. I can Boolean that out from that, and then I'm going to shift drag scale this in just a little bit, just to give myself a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of clearance in there. That way, if I were to print it, the pieces would fit together and all that kind of stuff. Blend, and that gives us our little pivot, which probably lives with this guy. And there's probably like, you know, this would probably be a chrome cap that went into a threaded sleeve that went into this piece down here. So let's make it that way. Let's go to the front view. Let's take a piece, a curve right through here, and we'll use wire cut. And wire cut's super cool. If you've ever made a foam model and used a hot wire to cut the foam, this is exactly what it does. So this is the cutting line. This is the object. We're going to go right through from the C-plane normal, and it just splits it into two pieces. But the cool thing about it is it puts the cap on it. So it actually cuts right through it like it was a solid object. So then we could probably assume that this would have like either an Allen key or a flat screw flat through it or something like that. But let's go ahead and do that. So let's go to the right view, and I'm going to assume that it's got like a flat, like a flathead screwdriver screw in it, and it would be a pretty good radius. So 0.15 thickness. Let's see how that looks. And I'm going to snappy drag this to the center and then pull it up. And it's probably needs to be even bigger, so shift drag. Something like that. If you guys have seen my videos before, you know I wing a lot of things. That feels about right. Something like that. Especially for demos. You guys aren't paying me, so I can fudge some things. So let's go ahead and do this, Boolean that out, and that gives us our little slot. And then that'll give us a nice little break. Now, one of the things I always do is see how this is lined up perfectly, right? And in CAD world, everything is perfect and everything is 90 degrees and all that kind of stuff, but that's not how life works, right? And so if this were to be a real object, there's a very good chance that if I were to tighten this, it would end up just stop moving and start turning. It would be just a little off, right? Like that. Because if you tighten it, how many, what are the chances, unless you're my wife who's super OCD about this stuff and lines up all the crosses on Phillips head screws. I'm not saying it's a problem, I'm just saying that's what she does. But if this were mine, this thing wouldn't be straight up. So I just turn it a little bit, and that gives it a little bit of life. When you do the rendering, you're like, oh, that's something that's been touched by humans. It's not this static, sterile thing that just exists in a computer. Question, can you tell us what the shortcut was to pull the surface section off the solid? That's drag and tap Alt. So if I Shift Control click and then start dragging, just start dragging that piece. Tap Alt until you see a little plus sign show up. See that? I don't know if you can see that flashing next to the red cursor there. And then once the plus sign shows up, you can let go, and that breaks off and copies the piece. So let's look at the next piece. And the next piece, probably we should do the button, because again, it's pretty simple. So I'm probably going to do that. Let's do something fun. Let's do a cylinder, and I'm just going to snap it to here. Do I have a near? It's not giving me a snap. All right, fine. We'll do it over here. Let's snap it kind of somewhere here, and then pull it out, and then just pull it up. And then I'm going to relocate the gumball to 0. And then I'm going to just rotate it around until it gets to where I want it to be, to that quad. There we go. And that way I know it's fairly well located. And then I have to decide, do I want this button to be straight up and down, or do I want it to have, and I'm going to reset my gumball now, boop. Or do I want it to be, do I want it to kind of follow the shape of the front of that thing? Probably want it angled just a little bit. That's kind of cool. I'm going to poke it down into the thing. This is like the on-air button, like the push the button here. Breaking news coming from Kyle's basement. Just going to teach you how to do Rhino models. So we'll stick that down in there like that, and then let's just clean it up a little bit, make it a little bit more interesting. I'm going to blend off this edge, but I'm going to do it a little bit bigger, like that. And then I've got kind of a cool opportunity here where I can take this thing and I can extrude it down just to give a little edge to that. See that? And then because I extruded it down, I can also shift control click, shift drag, and I can scale it in a little bit, which gives that a little angle. And then I can blend that stuff off. Need a much smaller one. And get a nice little shaped button with no modeling. We didn't do any modeling there. We just dragged some stuff around, right? See that? And then we need to make a space for it, so I'm going to just Boolean that out using a Boolean difference from this, using that. And then I'm going to shift drag, scale this in just a little bit so it's got that witness around it, and then I'm going to blend off this edge to give it that little kind of roll, right? So the last thing we need to do is put our text over here, the on-air text, and I'm going to emboss that in. We'll do kind of a cool little trick for this. I'm going to hide this for now because I don't need it. And I'm going to go to the top view, and I'm going to draw a curve for where I want my text to be centered. My center snap is not coming up. So my center snap's misbehaving. So I'm going to force, using a 3-point curve or 3-point circle, I'm going to snap to the edges of this. And then now I can take this, and first of all, I have a center point that I can snap to now, but I can shift drag and scale this up, and I know that it's located accurately. And then because I kind of want this to be about a little bit less than halfway up the button, I'm going to come through here and do a extract iso curve, and I'm going to pull a curve out of here until it's maybe, how do we feel about that? Something like that. And then I'm going to use that as a trim curve for this curve. And that gives me the curve that I'm going to then wrap my text around, but not quite yet. Now I'm going to take this curve and project it onto that surface. And now this is absolutely the curve that I'm going to use to project. See the two of them there? There's the original and the projection. I want to get rid of the original. That's the one I want. So that is going to be the curve that I'm going to wrap my text around. And the cool thing about this is I can go to the top view. I can use the text tool, and let's just do on air. I'm not even going to worry about the scale, but I do want it to be solid, and let's give it like a 1/4 inch thickness. And I'm going to group the output and say good, and that gives me my text. Now I want to look at this text. It looks a little janky. See how this is kind of overlapping and not very clean? And see how I lost? Interesting. See how this is not drawn very well? This just uses Microsoft fonts that are installed on my machine. So we need to clean this up a little bit. The first thing I'm going to do is merge all faces. And what that's going to do is look at this and say, is there anything in here that we can clean up? And in this case, it doesn't look like it. So let's look at this, because this is a problem that people run into a lot, where they use a font and the thing and it makes a mess. And in this case, that's exactly what's happened. So let's Shift Control U, which is ungroup. Actually, Shift Control G to ungroup, and let's look at these things in their individual pieces. Now, in this case, this thing, I'm going to just Boolean it together, and then I'm going to merge all faces. And in that case, see how that cleaned that all up? I'm going to do the same thing here, Boolean, and then merge all faces. That cleaned that up. This one's fine. This one's a mess. So let's explode it. And you can see that this isn't even vaguely, this is a mess. So let's get rid of this. And if you ever import a font or a curve from Illustrator, this is going to be your life. Illustrator makes really, really, really messy curves. And if you try to import them and model with them, they will make a mess. So let's join this. Now I can cap it. Now that's much cleaner. Now this is stuff that we can work with, right? And if I grab all this stuff and run check, everything looks good. All right, I can run it and check for naked edges. Looks like everything's good. So this stuff is now no longer bad. So now I'm going to take it and let's bring back everything else. Actually, let's just bring this curve and this stuff. Isolate command hides everything but what is selected. And I want to wrap this onto this curve. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to get myself some reference points here. And I'm going to draw a line that matches the length of the text here, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to map it from here to here. And I'm going to do that using flow along, I'm going to just use flow, which is the one that goes along a curve. So these are the objects I'm going to flow. This is the base curve. This is the reference, right? So what it's going to do is it's going to say the relationship of this to this is going to match the relationship of the new piece to this curve. So this is my base curve. And then this is the curve that we're going to go to. I am going to copy this because we're doing it with history, and that gives us a little bit of adjustment. And so you can see that it takes it and it wraps the thing around there. Now it distorted it a little bit, but I'm kind of okay with that. And if this is too big, see how that's kind of like a little crazy? Then what I'm going to do is scale this curve, which means I'm going to change the relationship between the original text and the original curve, which is then going to remap the new text to the new curve. And I don't necessarily like how that went down. So let's drag this a little bit. And as we change this, we can see what happens from the original to the copy. Woo, going the wrong way. There we go. Can use my arrow keys to nudge it to where I want it to be. And I'm just changing the relationship of the original curve to the original object. And then I might even want to go up a little bit and make that closer. See how it's tightening up? If I were to do a big jump, see that? So it's really cool because it makes this little remote control that you can then use down here to drive this. This is something that jewelry makers use all the time. So they'll model something flat and then they'll map it onto a surface and then they'll adjust it to get it exactly how they want it to go. So I'm going to say that's good. So I don't need this anymore, which kills my history. I'm going to bring this back and then select the last thing that I worked on using cell last. And then I'm going to bring this up like that. And then I want this to be, see how this is kind of stuck in there, but not really very cleanly. So I'm going to stick it in just so it touches. See how it just starts to touch like that. And then I'm going to do a little Boolean trick that I like to do. I'm going to remove from these surfaces using this. And that makes a clean perpendicular back to these guys. Now when I take this, now I can tuck them in here and get a Boolean. Now I can do a second Boolean from this using these guys. And I get a clean emboss where the back of this is parallel to this. That's the way to do that. All right, so that gives us our stand. We've got a pivot to make, but let's make the microphone first. So let's save, because we haven't done that yet. Exercise in bravery and stupidity by modeling this long without saving. All right, so now let's get to the star of the show, which is this. And we have to decide how to do this. There's a couple of ways that we could get there. We could do a rail revolve. We could do we could do it where we make a profile, extrude a tube, and then try to figure out how to make the caps and stuff like that. So there's a couple of ways that we could do this, but I think what I'm probably going to start with is I'm gonna try and do this with blend surf, and we'll see. It may be this might be a mess, but we'll see. So I'm going to steal the original curve here, this guy, and I'm going to take the rest of my curves and stick them on a layer because I don't need them for right now. So this is the curve that we use to build our stand from. So it would serve to reason that we should be able to use it. Scale it a little bit as the basis for our mic, right? And then that way we have a little family of shapes thing going on. And I may actually mirror this around where the pivot is. So let's do that. Let's decide where the pivot is. Let's draw a line through there and we'll save it for later. But I'm going to trim this. And then let's mirror this curve. And then let's do a little looking, right? We want to make sure, so that we have centerline tangency, we want to make sure which points are lined up. Those three right there. And see how there's a tiny scale handle? I'm just going to fix that by hitting 0 and make sure that these are all lined up. And then that way I've got perfect tangency side to side. So I'm going to join this, and then I'm going to mirror it in this direction. I'm going to join this up. We'll see whether this works. I've got a plan. We'll see how it works. I'm going to extrude this back and give myself what's called a proxy object. And what this is basically, imagine that this is just a tool that we're going to use. And then I'm going to split this up into two pieces from here to here. And then let's mirror that so that it's even. So then let's split this surface using these curves. And we should have these two pieces and those pieces, right? So let's use a blend surf and go from here to here. And that's going to create the basis of our shape. Now I'm going to get rid of the interior shapes because I don't need those. And that's a little big, so I'm going to actually change that to tangency. I'm going to lock these. I'm going to pull this back. Now I'm building half of the microphone here, like that. So what I've done is I've kind of I built myself a tool, right? And then I use that to bend a surface. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to blend this edge. Let's blend this edge. Let's do it right. This edge with this edge. And that looks pretty good. And then because this is, see how that's broken into two pieces? I don't like that. There had to be a seam somewhere. So I'm actually going to mirror this piece at the center line and use it down here instead, because I want that cleaner version. I don't want to have a seam in it. So then let's blend this again from here to there. Now let's join this up. And we can get rid of the back now and mirror the whole thing. And that gives us our basic shape. Now, is it the right profile? If not, then what we can do, because we know it's tangent along this side, if it needs to be longer, I just pull it back a little bit, which I think it does need to be. And then I can just blend all of these surfaces together, and I get this really nice thing, right? And we can look and see how we did by using EMAP, and we can see that we get a really beautiful blended shape. Like that. And in fact, this feels a little flat to me. So I'm actually going to steal, I'm going to chip a little bit more out of this thing, because this is tangent to the point where it's flat, but I don't necessarily want it to be flat because that flatness is showing up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually trim. I'm going to place the center of my rectangle using the between snap, and I'm going to draw out about that far, which should get me past the flatness of my tangency. And if this doesn't make sense to you, don't worry about it. But to explain it in simpler terms, part too flat, try make more smooth. Okay, that's what I'm trying to do here. Chain the edges. And now you see how I get just a little roundness in this. See this roundness in the shape? That is likely going to get rid of that weird flatness. See how that's gone now? And we have that beautiful rounded piece. You saw that before, right? Those witness lines where the flatness was. Sarah, which command were you looking at? What did I do? Sorry, I missed it. I missed your question before. Hit the chat again and let me know what you missed. EMAP. EMAP. This one. And EMAP is cool because it's an evaluation tool. There's a bunch of different things you can choose in here. And it just puts a material on here that you can use for evaluation purposes. There's another one called True Sphere, which is a zebra. So we can see that we did a nice job with all of our blending. All right, so we did a good job. So we know we've got what we want. So let's then, we're a little out of center here. We're also a little fat. So I'm gonna O snap this using gumball. to the center of that. And then it's a little fat, so I'm just going to scale it in just a little bit. And I think we've kind of nailed it then. Now, if we're really being fussy, we should look and we should set our gumball to the center of our pivot and make sure that this thing actually does rotate. And I'm using the between snap again to snap this right in the center there. So that'll be our center. So let's set our gumball to there. And then let's rotate it and make sure it doesn't smack into there. And it kind of does just a little bit. See that? So let's raise it just a hair so that it doesn't do that. So I'm going to raise the whole thing up just a little bit and then change our gumball again. Now it clears. We want to make sure it clears. Okay, so that's the right position, so we can go ahead and build our pivot. But let's do the fun stuff more. Let's do the detailing on this thing. So I've got too many isoparams here that I don't want to see because it's getting in my way. So I'm going to go to my General tab, Object, and I'm going to shut my ISO curve density down so that it removes that stuff so I can actually see what I'm doing. And then I'm going to use rounded rectangles. And I'm going to drag out like this and make it full round. And then I'm going to use a linear array. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of these. And we want to go from like here to there. Now these guys have a different shape, but that's fine. Let's go ahead and draw that in like that. Actually, let's do it correctly. So I'm going to do a center square. I'm going to find the midpoint here and snap to the midpoint. And I'm going to shift drag out to get a square. And then I'm going to rotate that guy 45. A little bigger than I was hoping, so I'm going to just shift drag it down. And then copy paste, shift drag. See how I try to use gumball and all of the gumball tricks so I don't have to keep searching for menu items? I would highly recommend doing that. And these all have little fillets on it, so we'll go ahead and put those on, really small ones, something like this. Unable to fillet, the fillet radius may be too big, or the curves are not in the same plane. That's most likely the case. So let's grab them. See how my curves for my square up here, my curves for my projector back here. I'm going to fix that by just scaling them together using gumball. See how they jump together like that? If you scale to 0, everything meets in the middle. And then let's try this again. And that worked. That's a little too small. That's better. Actually, that's still too small. There we go. That feels better. There's a tool called Fillet Corners that would do all that all that in one shot too, just so you know that. All right, so we've got these guys. So let's mirror them over. Actually, we're just going to model 1/2 of this thing. We'll cut it in half and then mirror it because that's the efficient thing to do. So let's join all these up. I'm going to put them all on the same plane right now. They're on different planes, so I'm going to scale it to 0 and then drag these forward just so I can see where they are. And then let's go ahead and project them onto this object. And because we have to have a Levi says, will this demo be available to watch again? Yeah, we're recording this and it goes up on our YouTube page. Rhinoceros 3D is our YouTube page. So we're going to project this all the way through, which is going to give us the opportunity to split this thing, but there's a break in this in the center. So I'm gonna take these and hide them for now. Then we're gonna go to the top view, and you can see where all our curves are projected. And I'm gonna draw a rectangle from the center, and I'm gonna decide how big our split's gonna be. And our split's gonna be about this big, and I'm gonna hide the geometry for right now and grab this and trim all of those guys out. So I've trimmed all those curves out. Now I just need to go ahead and connect the dots. I'll use the line command and just go here to here. Oops. Helps if you actually get it all the way. Line is nice because it only asks for one line, whereas polysurface, or polycurve, it makes you, it's one extra click, and that's how fussy I am about not having extra clicks. So line just wants 2 inputs and it finishes itself, whereas polyline, it's 2 inputs plus an enter. That's how you get fast, folks. Pay attention to that stuff. It's also how you avoid having repetitive strain injuries on your wrist. All right, so let's do fillets. And I'm going to use the fillet corners. What ties do we use? 0.1. Fillet corners. Grab all of these guys and say 0.1, and it does them all at the same time. So that is our pattern, right? So I'm going to hide this. And what we need to do is we need to figure out how to get that pattern in here, and we can do it simply like this, right? We can just split this thing, and we can use all of these curves, and it breaks it up. It makes me look like an idiot in public. Okay, so let's try it one at a time. Let's split this. Let's use these guys. Nope. So I've got one open curve there. I'm going to get rid of that. Let's try this. Split curves. No. All right. Interesting. Let's try it from an orthogonal view. Nothing. All righty then. So, because it's going to misbehave, and I'm not entirely sure why. Let's see. Split. Try them one at a time. Nothing. It's saying that it's not on the surface, but it is on the surface. Might have a slight, because we did the fillet, there might be an issue there. So let's try pulling these curves. Select the curves. I don't want this guy for the time being. Let's see if we can pull them to this surface. That's not doing what I wanted it to do. All right, fine. Let's do this. We'll force it. So I'm going to go, we'll do gumball tricks. That's always fun. Control, rotate. I'm going to make it vaguely perpendicular. Doesn't have to be perfect. Extrude with a shift, and I'm going to make a surface that definitely goes through there, right? And this will actually be useful going forward because we'll be able to make the copies of this thing. So then let's take and split using all of these guys. That'll learn you. Never let the robots win. All right, so I'm going to leave these out here for the time being. In fact, I may actually trim these for now and leave those little fins sticking in. like that, because we want that little thickness in there, right? So let's do the same thing back here. And we could mirror those because the thing's symmetrical, but let's just do it again for fun. Reinforced learning. Now, control first, rotate, make it vaguely perpendicular, and then extrude, hold down shift. Ta-da! Gumball tricks. And then split using those. Nope. Split using these. Interesting. One of these must be open. Those worked. We'll find out who the bad actor is here. Either that or I selected something that it didn't like. See what I said about you model something you never modeled before, you run into problems you didn't expect? That's why we do this stuff. I try to show you what happens when it all goes horribly wrong. Because it does. Don't let anybody lie to you. Any software company that tells you that things are going to go perfectly from day one are lying to you. So let's join all this up. Now, this thing does actually have a center core to it. So what I'm going to do, and I should have done this earlier, is I'm actually going to copy this. I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to isolate that piece, right? And then I'm going to, because this thing is symmetrical, and I don't want to go through all the hassle of untrimming this, I'm just going to cut this in half and then mirror this. Never underestimate the lengths I will go to not have to model something twice. Now we'll bring everything back. I'll grab this guy, shift drag, and see how I've got my internal piece now. Then I can take and Boolean these two together. It's not exactly what I wanted. So let's look at the directions, because I actually want these to combine together. So the direction on that is pointing out. The direction on that is pointing in, it looks like. So let's flip that one. And now let's do the Boolean again. If your Booleans are backwards, it's a direction issue. There we go. That did what I wanted it to do. So let's do exactly what we just did before. Start in the center, trim this in half, mirror it, join it up. That's why we spent so much time at the beginning making sure that all of our centerline tangencies were good so we could go top to bottom, left to right, and have this thing still be clean, right? If we emap this, it's still nice and clean. See that? All right, I'm going to save again. Let's do our last couple of little details here. We've got to do the same thing at the bottom. And it looks like, from all the reference I could find, the top and the bottom ones actually are only on the front. The back of this thing is actually closed. So let's just do the front and the back. And actually, I probably should have done this before I did the Booleaning and all that nonsense, but live and learn. And we'll do a linear array. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of those. And to make sure that this is centered, I'm going to grab all of this. See how the gumball is not centered? I'm going to snap that to the center because it's a symmetrical number, right? And if I pick it, the gumball lands in the bounding box center of these objects, which means if I snap that to the center, the array is centered, which is exactly what I wanted. So let's take these guys. Let's do these a different way, just to show a different idea. And I'm going to take these and just extrude them straight forward. I'm going to cap, and then I'm going to Boolean subtract from these guys this thing. Similarly to what we did with the lettering. And then I'm going to take these and I'm going to move them down a little bit. And I can even do this if I want to do it like perfect. Let's do 0.15. Let's do negative 0.15. Oops, negative 0.15. I said it and didn't do it. Down, and then let's do 0.15 in, and that way we know they're down and in. We're a little past the center line, so I could hack those off if I wanted to, but I think I'm going to leave them. The only problem with this is it's not going to give me my rounded backs, which I want, which I think we could get with a blend. Let's try that. So let's fillet these. And that's going to be way too much. So let's set all and preview it. I could go a little bigger. If that works, that's pretty fantastic. But I think I may back it off just a hair. There we go. So let's do that. And that'll give us our round when we do our Boolean. See, we're being sneaky now. We're taking something that's hard and we're cheating. I mean, doing it efficiently. Remove these. There we go. Be nice if we got all of them. There we go. And actually, because we already made those guys, let's just steal them and use them on the bottom. Because we know the thing's symmetrical top to bottom, so we know if they work on the top, they're going to work on the bottom, right? And I should probably make sure that that was centered around the midline. I think it was. But I'm not sure, so let's figure it out. I think our center is somewhere in here. Where's our mid? That's our midpoint right there. So let's use that. Make sure that we're using the same. It's, you know, it's like you kind of, even though it's a demo, we want to try and not be like complete hacks. Although that doesn't look right, does it? Looks like it's too high. All right, fine. I'm going to just fake it. We'll call it that. And then the last thing that we need to do is just this center detail and the pivots, and we're out of here. I'm going to put my curves back on this layer. I keep all my curves just, you know, I have clients that are fussy. I mean, picky. I mean, precise, particular. I'm trying to figure out a nice way to say it. They're fussy. It's okay. That's their job. All right, let's do, the center is going to be between these 2 points. And that's not that big. And then let's make the the little Phillips head thing that goes in there. We're going to do it about that. Copy paste, rotate 90, and we will Boolean from that. That's our little adjuster. And then we'll mirror it around 0 because we built it at the center line. We'll put the main pivot through the entire thing. We can use the center of this guy. It's around here somewhere. There we go. I don't need to Boolean that. I'm just going to stick it through there. And then the last thing we have to do is the center detail, which is this guy, which I think we had somewhere, didn't we? We did. There he is. Changes to the default and hide the rest of them. And it has a little roundy detail in the center, so let's go ahead and put it in because we'll get it for free. And I'm just going to light up some snaps here so I can find the intersecting point. And we're going to make a planar surface out of these guys. And it looks like my curves were not lined up correctly. So let's do that. And then let's do the planar surface again. Because I didn't have them lined up correctly, it made two surfaces, and I just wanted one like that. So I'm going to extrude this long. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing I did before, where I'm going to stick it in here like that. Because I want the front of this to match the front of that. And then I'm going to do a Boolean split using this. Don't want to delete the inputs. And get rid of that one. And I want to keep this one and pull it out. See how it matches the shape now? And then all I need to do is just blend off the edges and we're out of here. Boolean that in now to finish it up. All right, so that's our model done. Let's save it and take a peek at what we did. Got some kind of crazy background going on here. So let's tools, options. This is rendered mode. Not quite sure what's going on with that background. Let's hide our image. And then let's throw a few materials on this guy, shall we? The entire thing is made out of chrome. So I'm going to just grab a, that's why. Render, current render set to flamingo. Let's set it to Rhino render. And then I'm going to need to reset my interesting shaded. Huh. Odd. Okay, let's see what we got going on here. Background. Looks like there might be an issue with this update. There we go. All right, so let's throw some materials on here. And we're going to throw chrome on the entire thing. Whoa. Ah, that's what it is. had the flamingo background set up. There it is. Thought I wasn't losing my mind. And let's see, for the background, for the render stuff, let's reset to defaults. There we go. That's what we were looking for. So let's add some interest to this. We're going to do a plastic, black. I'm going to shift command. This is a poly surface, right? If I shift control click and click, I can sub object assign materials to that, which is cool. I can also do the same thing up here. And pick all the backs of these things. Starts coming to life pretty quick. Let's do our button. Let's do that a red plastic. I'll drag that one on. And then let's get the bottom. I'm going to hide this for right this minute. Let's get the bottom of these shift control drag, and I can get all of those guys and assign, except for that one. Those three I wanted to stay metal. And that makes it look like it's painted in there. Oh, we have our little cord, excuse me, that comes out of the back of that. So let's make that real quick. How are we doing? 1022? Yeah, we're doing all right. Almost done. I'm going to do this with a truncated cone. Make that little grommet. And then I'm going to just steal that, stick it up here like that. And then I'm going to draw a curve from the center of this guy. And I'm just going to use a straight line because it's easiest to nail down. And then we'll do some edits to it. So I can snap center to center so I know that the ends are going to touch correctly. And then if I go to the right-hand view and I change its degree from 1 to 3, then I get some control points that I can play with. And I can pull this out like that. And I can pull this down like that. And we'll pipe that. Something small. And I'm going to just nudge it once to tuck it in there and assign it. And there's our little thing. And I may want to even rotate this whole thing just a hair. And the cool thing about this is if I grab the original curve and turn the points on and grab that point, set my gumball to the center of this guy, which I should be able to find, and then rotate it, history should update this chord. Wah. It did update the curve, but let's pipe it again. There we go. That's going to be so impressive. Oh well. Live demo. All right, and there's our mic. Save it. We might want to play with some materials. Maybe we make another metal just to give it a little bit of interest, and we take one and maybe we rough that one out a little bit. This chrome is a little bright, so maybe we drop it back a little bit. maybe a little more. Give it a little older look to it. And then maybe it's just a little too polished, so maybe we roughen it up just a little bit. And then maybe we take another metal and we make it a little darker. And maybe we give this piece a little bit different. That looks a little dark, so let's lighten that up a little bit. We just want it to look like maybe one piece was cast and polished and another piece was aluminum. Maybe it's shinier than the other, maybe it's less shiny. And then the plastic is really shiny, so let's cut that back a little bit. Actually, let's leave it high, but change the polish. There we go. And then we can just run a ray trace render on it. Actually, we're going to save it first. Ray traced, and we're just let it run. And I have my edges turned on, so let's turn those off. And just let the render run. Hour and 26 minutes. How'd we do? How many people are still here? Most of them. I didn't bore anybody to death yet. All right, YouTube page is here. While this is going up, I'll show you where that is. We have a YouTube and a Vimeo. The same videos go on each, but whichever one you choose to use is up to you. So Rhinoceros 3D is the official page. All of the stuff that we've done in the past, this big wheel that I just did for the Mac folks, is up here. This one will go up here as well, as does the radio and all the other stuff I've done. All the other getting starteds are here as well as what's new in Rhino 7. This is one that you're going to want to check out. So this is the page. Please subscribe. And then the Vimeo page is here. Same videos go up there. It just depends on whether you like using Vimeo or YouTube. All right, so there's that. All of these go up here as well. This is also where we keep all the videos for the company that are private. So there's a lot of stuff on here that you won't be able to access, but all the public stuff should at least be public facing there. Other stuff that you want to look at. You want to look at our webpage. If you haven't looked at our webpage, go to the Learn tab. Make sure that you're looking at this stuff. This is where you sign up for the on-demand classes, or live classes, sorry, Rhino Live. This is where you find the links for the next one. And also any type of other online classes or anything like that you wanted to do. Our level 1 and level 2 manuals are free. Download them and go through them. You can do these for free. And then there's some other stuff in here that you might want to take a peek at. All right. So make sure that you're utilizing these resources. Also, if you hit the community button up here, it takes you to our forum. Our forum is a untapped mega city of information. Make sure that you're using this. If you've been on a software forum and didn't like it because people were jerks, come to our forum. We tend to be a fairly civil lot, and folks who are misbehaving get banned. So we like to have all help, none of the hassle. So make sure that you're using our forum. Ask questions as you're getting started. I'm on the forum every day. Our developers are on the forum every day. Bob is on the forum every day. So if you really want to talk to somebody, he's there. All right. And he's a super awesome guy, by the way. And I don't just say that because I work with him. I've been friends with him for years before I started working with him, and he was a great guy even then. So I don't want to just sound like I'm a complete kiss up, but he's a fantastic person. All right. Any other questions? Anything else you want to know? Anything that you saw about this that you want me to cover more of? If not, I will let you go. Thank you for joining. I always appreciate having an audience. It makes it a lot more interesting than sitting here and talking to myself. Here's the finished rendering. Go use your voice. Go use your talents. Go make great stuff. I'm Kyle Houchins. This is Rhino 6 getting started for Windows. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.